Today we'll talk about virtual management of vulvovaginitis. At first, when you approached me, I thought I was very skeptical about this topic because everybody knows everything. There's nothing much to talk. But then after going through the latest, I thought maybe in the times of COVID-19, when we are not seeing the patient, we are not examining, how do we diagnose these patients with vulvovaginitis? How do we differentiate, and how do we manage to treat them? That's what. And before starting, I thought telemedicine is so important for all of us. So let us share a little, all of us should know a little about telemedicine. So first 2 or 3 slides, I'll talk about what is telemedicine. And we all know that it is defined as the use of telecommunication to provide medical information and services just between two professionals or the patient, or you can video, audio, all these things. And I'm very happy to tell you that the first telemedicine unit was inaugurated at Osmania Medical College when I was principal, by no other than our beloved former president, Dr. Abdul Kalam. We had a telemedicine for teaching the students. That was what we started in 2008. Then it has 2 concepts: real time, synchronous, asynchronous. Real time is where we can see each other and talk to each other. It's live. And the other asynchronous is we store and forward. So it can be used for many things like adjusting depression, anxiety. Here they have written blood pressure. I would say blood pressure we can do on telemedicine, because if it is an obstetric patient, I would personally like to record the blood pressure myself and not allow even my juniors to record. But otherwise, for treatment, for control, for checking of the reports, once you ask them to have some remotes, you don't want them to come back again, especially in today's world. We don't want the patient to travel. Yes? Hello? We don't want the patient to travel so many times to our office. So we are exposed to infection, they are exposed to infection. So gynec, most probably we will be able to manage with telemedicine and some amount of, even obstetrics, we can manage for repeat visits. It provides, of course, safety and post-operative also, just to know how the patient is. We don't ask them to come unless we have to check them. It is imperative that we check them. Otherwise, we can always use telemedicine to tell them, for the patient to inform us how they are, whether they have any problems or any fever, anything. And STD screening, and also these treat after biopsies, your reports, basically your histopathology reports, your blood workup, all these can be discussed with the patient by using your telemedicine. And how about, will the patient feel comfortable? Most of our patients want to talk to us. They want us to see them, touch them, because we know so many patients, if you touch me, I'll be relieved. But that aspect we have to forget now in future, and we have to tell them, see, it is safe for safety of yourself, for us, and for the whole community. It is better we talk to each other, we don't touch each other. So you come, if it is a dire necessity, yes, you please come, I will see you. But if you think it is, if we think it is not necessary, please contact me by video, by phone, and I will be able to. And are all the patients tech savvy? Every patient, I'm sure every one of them owns a mobile. So they can, and it's very simple to use. So patients are happy that you can talk to them personally, because when they come to your clinic, maybe to your office, they have to wait for a long time. We do not want them to wait, and they will spend less money coming, going, traveling. All that is, they don't have to do all those things. They don't have to travel many times. They don't have to worry about who's going to bring them, and waiting, and all that is avoided. So coming to our main topic, vulvovaginitis. It is a very simple topic. Everybody knows the answers. How do you manage? How do you treat? But I want to only refresh your memory and stress on some very salient points. We know that the prevalence of fungal infection is 37% and it decreases after menopause. And there are 150 species. Candida albicans is the commonest, followed by glabrata, which is the second most common. And these are found in most of the recurrences we get. Even tropicalis, 5% we find when there is recurrent vulvovaginitis. And the other species are Cruce, Culemonda, are very rarely isolated. In the recent years, there is a significant increase in non-albicans species, particularly glabrata and tropicalis, especially in the recurrent. And non-candidial accounts for candidial account for 20% of the cases and 30% of recurrences. So why is there recurrence? Our most important factor is recurrence. All of us see a lot of recurrence and they are very, very worrisome and distressing for the patient herself and also for the consultant physician. So widespread inappropriate use of antimycotic treatments. Inappropriate use, you have to use it for a certain period of time. Self-medication, long-term treatment, repeated treatments, and especially shorter courses of these treatments may lead to overgrowth of the Candida glabrata. So how do we get from the vagina? They get infection, the source is from the vagina. Here 35% of healthy females, they are secondary opportunistic pathogens from the GI tract, anogenital, especially if the bowels misbehave, there is free stools, loose stools usually. And the husband, everybody says it's very rare, 25% of STD occurs, but I have seen candidiasis occurring because the husband has diabetes mellitus. This particular patient of mine, she was suffering from repeated vaginal discharge, vulvovaginitis for the past 2 years. She's been going around all over and she has been treated correctly for the past, on and off for the past 2 years. In spite of it, she had the recurrence. When she came to me, as usual, I just asked her, do you have, anybody in the family has diabetes? She says, no, but my mother-in-law has. So then I asked her, does your husband have? She said, no. But I said, when did you get him tested? She said, no. I said, okay, please get it, ask him to get tested. His fasting blood sugar was 450. He said he did not have any symptoms. But then after I sent him to the endocrinologist, he was treated, his sugars were normalized. She does not have the recurrence. She still comes to me once in 3 months for checkup and she's free of the symptoms. So it is not usually acquired through sexual intercourse, but sometimes, excuse me, rarely it can happen. Like it happened to this patient of mine whose husband was a diabetic. Then all of us know it is compromised immunity, trauma, allergens, especially in this modern day allergens, people, they use different kind of depilators, douches, and the innerwear they wear is all plastic or synthetic, and you wear your tracks and your yoga suits. All these can lead to excessive sweating, and increased moisture can cause infection, candidiasis. For pregnancy and immune suppression and endocrine disorders. Here, all of us know diabetes is one of the predisposing factors. And what the most important test you have to do is the HbA1c. Because if it is above 5.8, she is not a diabetic, she's a pre-diabetic, but she has all the complications and problems of a diabetes, especially she is more prone for vulvovaginitis. most of your patients, they get RBS done or FBS done, and we think they are normal. But your HbA1c will tell you whether they are pre-diabetic. And if they are pre-diabetic, vulvovaginitis can occur. And recurrence is one of the reasons if they are pre-diabetic. So we have to test diabetes. And in some of my patients, fasting post-lunch is sure, but then I have a feeling that she may be a diabetic because when I examine them, she has this curdy white discharge, sodden vagina. So I said, okay, I'm not happy with your blood test. Please get a GTT done. And of course, GTT is abnormal. So diabetes has to be thoroughly and repeatedly examined if you have a clinical doubt that she has diabetes. Of course, you do your exclude thyroid, adrenal, and others. And during the menstrual cycle, late luteal phase, especially in the transition phase of premenopausal transition, they have a lot of vulvovaginitis in the late luteal phase. OCPs, all of us know, contribute because of when it contains high estrogenic action, and they do have vulvovaginitis. And IUCD, if the threads act as a reservoir for the candida. So diabetes, I already told you, is predisposed to clinical vaginitis. And whenever we prescribe antibiotics to suppress, they suppress lactobacilli, and it causes candidiasis. So there are no proper studies to show, but we have ourselves personally seen and experienced that antibiotics do cause vulvovaginitis. Then to be invasive, the Candida albicans has to follow 3 stages. One stage of adhesion, and then there is a blastopore germination, the hyphae development, and after that, once the hyphae develop, they start, there is invasion into the epithelium leading to vulvovaginitis. Only after invasion you have the symptoms. Transformation of the vaginal colonization into vaginitis is a critical step in the pathogenic mechanism. And during colonization, the candida are present in the blastopore forms. Only when their numbers are very high and the immunity is less, they become pathological and you have the symptoms. So usually there is a balance between the candida organisms and vaginal defense. That is your Dodderlin's bacilli, the pathology, the good virus bacilli in the vagina, the Dodderlin's bacilli, they limit and prevent the fungal growth. When these infection outgrows, naturally you have the symptoms. And vaginitis appears because of an increased number of virulence, enhanced virulence, and also the multiplication. Candida multiplies very rapidly. If you have one spore, in 2 days' time, it multiplies maybe 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. And also because of decreased vaginal defense. And because of decreased vaginal defense mechanism when this occurs. Dr. Chitra, many of my people are calling me up saying they cannot log in. Decreased vaginal defense mechanism, and when this occurs, blastosphere adhere to the vaginal epithelium and germinate, mycelium develops, and finally invades mucous membrane, producing vaginitis. So all of us know the symptoms, of course, intense pruritus. That is the most important cardinal symptom of vulvovaginitis, intense pruritus. There are many reasons for pruritus, and when you want to do telemedicine for pruritus, differential diagnosis, there are 101 causes you have to exclude. But the most important causes which you have to exclude is 1, tinea, 2 is your trichomonas, and 3 is any allergens which we cause, and of course, vaginosis, bacterial vaginosis. And allergies, you have to ask them whether they use douches, what kind of depilators they use. And nowadays nobody swims, so it's okay. Otherwise, with the swimming trunks, they usually have metal rings So that also can cause the intense pruritus. And for this, there is intense pruritus, flaky white discharge, more because of excess moisture. It is more in the evening and more when they wear any synthetic uh, dresses. So discharge can be very thick, scanty, whitish, profuse, and the pH is 4.5. And because of this itching, there will be a burning, and the vagina is very sodden. And and sometimes they can have burning micturition. And because of this intense pruritus, the vagina vulva is inflamed. And when they pass urine, it's not the UTI, but the urine falling on the vulva and the vagina will cause the burning sensation. So that also leads to dyspareunia and dysuria. So the diagnosis, of course, basically it's very important. You look at take a detailed history. Nothing, 50% you can diagnose with your history, another 75% by examination. And nowadays examination is out because we're only doing telemedicine. So it's very, very important that you take a very, very detailed history. And if they have intense pruritus, you ask them what time, when is the pruritus more? Where is it? Is it more around the anus? It's around the anus, around middle of the night. If they have pruritus, then you know it is, you have to give them antihelminthic. And if it is spreading onto the thighs and the groin, and there is a little hyperpigmentation, most probably it is tinea. Otherwise, it may be only trichomonas or candidiasis. Usually they will tell you it's a curdy white discharge. So it's very easy to ask them on the phone and identify. Then if you're examining, of course, you do a wet mount, you see the hyphae. Pap smear, it is not performed for this. You do the culture with the Nickerson or Sabarod media. And the kid slide agglutination test can be done. Then recurrence, what is the management? Here I want to tell you very, very important. Management is very, very important as the history. So in recurrent vulvovaginitis, here it is said that you have to treat for 7 to 14 days, but personally, I treat for 3 weeks, 21 days. Even that is 1 week after her symptoms have subsided completely, I want them to use the treatment. So local clotrimazole cream and 150 milligram oral dose of fluconazole repeated 3 days later. If it is, she had the recurrence 3 or 4 times earlier, I give it weekly for 6 weeks. This is very, very important that you ask them to continue the local application for 3 weeks or 1 week after. And severe vulvovaginitis, again 3 weeks of topical therapy, 150 milligrams fluconazole repeated every 22 hours and once a week for 6 weeks. So I know that most of our patients don't listen to us. They don't want to continue for 3 weeks because they'll be all right with the local application within 3 or 4 days. So they don't want to. I myself fall into that category. I don't want to continue for a longer time. So here I remember a very apt couplet of Kabir, the Saint Kabir, which is not only apt for this, but for our everyday life now. He says that if you always, all of us pray when we are in trouble. We never pray when we are happy. But if we pray when we are happy, the troubles will not come in our way. So, dukh mein sumiran sab kare, sukh mein kare na koi. Sukh mein sumiran kare to dukh kahe ho. That's what the Saint Kabir says. It's the same thing where they are happy that they are relieved of their symptoms. They don't continue to use the local therapy. But again they fall into trouble. Again they come in. They have to be retreated. So it's very, very important that treatment, the course of the treatment is very important, especially for candidiasis, because even if, and where do they apply? They have to apply all above the vagina, up to the anal region, around the anal region, and into the vagina. And they have to relieve, if they are sweating a lot, especially summer, please ask them to have these candid powder, so that the sweat will be absorbed. So moisture increases the recurrence and increases the infection rate. Then coming to bacterial vaginosis, all of you know that bacterial vaginosis is very, very important because it's one of the commonest cause of UTI, one of the commonest causes of preterm labors and infertility. And also, when I was reading, I realized it also increases the incidence of HPV. So in India, it's almost 25%, and it ranges from 10 to 35%. And the vagina is dynamic. It's not steady. It's not a steady state of ecosystem. Menstruation, there is cyclic change in the vaginal environment. Levels of estrogen and progesterone alter. And this changing environment, the influences for lactobacilli is influenced by influencing the cell surface receptor expression. The levels of glycogen glucose substrate are changing, and the levels of the vaginal pH increase in bacterial vaginosis. So estrogen is protective. So if you use estrogen, you get candidiasis, but you're prevented from bacterial vaginosis. And bacterial vaginosis is less in the third trimester, but you can get it in the first and second trimester. So that is the reason why you have more of preterm deliveries. Clinical trials with estradiol, they cure BV by restoring the pH according to Okin scale 2005. So here, this is the sequelae of bacterial vaginosis. I want to give, which is very important. I want you to see there is increased HSV2 infection and increased HIV shedding, increased incidence of HIV and HPV. Infection with HPV they're more susceptible to HPV when they are infected with bacterial vaginosis. I'll tell you one case. A very young girl, 34-year-old girl, para 2, her last child is 18 months old, and she had watery discharge. And of course, she has UTI since a long time, on and off. So she thinks she just neglected her UTI. She had watery and slight sticky and a little white discharge. She rang up her obstetrician. She said, it's okay, nothing to worry. You take a douche and some pessaries and she's fine. She was okay for a month. She had the same symptoms again after the second month. After that, she said, why should I go to the doctor? I'll treat myself. And she used the same drugs. Okay, fine. After that, she had 2 months later, she had continuous vaginal bleeding. She had bleeding, which her consultant asked her to get a scan done. Everything is fine. So they put her on the hormones for 2 months. She was okay. She didn't bother. Then after stopping the hormones, again, 2 months later, or a month later, she again had this vaginal discharge. They said it's because of your hormones. You have taken it for 2 months, so you will have an excessive discharge. Just use your vaginal pessaries and that's okay. And 3 months later, all this is period of 6th, 7th month from the time she started a vaginal discharge, which she said now, retrospectively when I asked her, she said it was a little fishy odor, white color. And then 7th month, she had blood-stained white discharge. And then that was the time she went to they did a scan and they said it's a polyp, cervical polyp. So she was posted for polypectomy. On the table in the theater, they found a huge mass arising from the cervix, a 4.5 centimeter friable mass bleeding to touch from the cervix. Then it was a corporate hospital, so the oncosurgeon came in, he did the biopsy, he did the examination, she was already under anesthesia. So they knew it was cancer cervix, 2B cancer cervix, and the report came as small cell carcinoma. 34-year-old small cell carcinoma 2B, and she's been going to her consultant for the past, or consulting on and off for the past 7 months. So why I'm telling you this story is she just had watery discharge, sticky watery discharge 7 months ago. If somebody had talked to her, I mean, even if you didn't examine her, even if you had taken a proper history, maybe you would have treated for bacterial vaginosis, because she clearly says, I do have some odor. Anyways, that's why I'm telling you the stories. And now she's had 3 chemos. She's due for surgery and later on followed by chemo and radio. So infection with HPV, it increases. Even in 2018, I've read an article that they say that it increases the chances of HPV. Okay. And she is positive for HPV. The biopsy was positive for HPV 16. The HPV DNA was positive. So it's not only you have endometritis with bacterial vaginosis, you have endometritis, and you have recurrent implantation failure, you have recurrent miscarriages, recurrent UTI, and recurrent UTI is the cause for bacterial vaginosis. We had done and postpartum endometritis, PID. We had done a study of all the women who come to the gynecopy with or without discharge. And we found about 33% had bacterial vaginosis. And then we also have done another study where we have taken the smears for all those patients who were in preterm labor. And 50 to 65% had bacterial vagina. So all those who are draining and who were in late preterm, they were in labor, preterm labor, active labor. In those, the swarms had come positive. So bacterial vaginosis is very, very important. You take a proper history, examination, send it for testing, and treat properly. So the pH is high, you have bacterial vaginosis, the symptoms 5 to 6, and if the pH is low, you have Gardnerella. So diagnosis for bacterial vaginosis, gram stain, you have the Nugent score, you see the clue cells, and 0 to 3, dominated gram cell positive, that is lactobacilli, 4 to 6 intermediate, 7 to 10 is for, whenever you see clue cells, you know it is bacterial vaginosis, 7 to 10 for bacterial vaginosis. And of course, the management, the recommended regime is metronidazole 400. All of you know this, I don't have to tell you. 400 to 500 milligram twice daily for 5 to 7 days, and a local clotrimazole cream, clindamycin. Then antifungals and antibiotics are the mainstay of therapy. Recurrence rate is high. So I personally, it's my personal experience that we use probiotics. Definitely the recurrence rate has reduced. Why? Why is there so much of recurrence? The recurrent nature of the decrease is because of the multi-drug resistant bacteria, as well as patient dissatisfaction, side effect of the drugs, and inadequate use. They don't use it for the time you prescribe. So probiotics combined with antifungals will be beneficial to prevent the recurrence, and also it will help the complete treatment of the patient, of the disease. So WHO says that these probiotics, they call them as live drugs, living drugs. So they are live microorganisms which when administered in adequate amounts, they confer a health benefit to the host. This again, the Harvard Health study in 2018 and 2019, they have also said that it definitely improves, the probiotics definitely improves the health of the person, and also is improves the immunity, especially today with COVID-19, and it improves the immunity. So my probiotic is a bacterial strain that survives the stomach acid and bile, adheres to the intestinal lining, grows and establishes temporary residence in the intestines, imparts health benefits. So what is the mechanism of action of probiotics? So they increase the Th1 cytokine, so they have to lower the Th2 cytokines. They increase the anti-inflammatory response and decrease the inflammatory infiltrates. and they increase the IL-10 and TGF-beta. They increase the pathogen exclusion, killing, adherence, decrease the adherence of the epithelia to epithelia and mucosa of the bacilli. And bacteriocin increases bacteriocin production. Then it increases the epithelial barrier, increases the tight junction protein expression, bacterial, it decreases the bacterial translocation. And it decreases the allergen-specific IgE, increases allergen-specific IgG. So prebiotics and probiotics are also called symbiotics. Now the prebiotics also have the similar type of action, and one helps the other. Pre and post helps the other. So prebiotics stimulates the growth of reproduction of useful microflora. They maintain the optimal pH in the intestine, stimulate the local immunity. That's why they improve the immunity, remove excess mucus from the small walls. This is mainly for the gastroenterologist. Remove the walls of the small intestine, reduce formation of gases, suppress reproduction in the intestine's pathogenic bacteria, stimulate peristalsis, improve the work of the digestive system. So we know that most of the gastroenterologists prescribe probiotics, and all those who are on a diet, and once you visit your nutritionist, most of the nutritionists swear by probiotics. You have probiotic yogurt, you have probiotic tea, you have probiotic flour to make rotis, probiotic rice, everything they say you use probiotics. So biological control and to improve the reproductive, this is an article published in 2014. Excuse me. The overgrowth of anaerobes produce noxious substances like polyamines and other compounds that trigger the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines and ILB and ILB8. So BV can profoundly affect the different mechanisms, all the phases of woman's life in relation to reproduction, before pregnancy, during fertilization, and the end of pregnancy. And it can affect fertility, because I already told you it can infect, it can cause endometritis. It may be because when you have bacterial vaginosis, 30% you have with bacterial vaginosis, it increases the incidence of chlamydial infection. And chlamydia, we all know, can cause tubal block, head, PID, and infertility. It's a silent killer, chlamydia. And bacterial vaginosis infection also enhances chlamydial infection. So probiotics, they improve the, potentiate the action of your antibiotics, and also prevent recurrence and promote immunogenicity. So abnormal microbiota may be associated with poor outcomes in IVF. Yes, I personally used before IVF, before the embryo transfer, we do give a 15-day of probiotics, and also before IUI also I use a 15-day course of probiotics. So I don't think I'm telling you because Shield has asked me to talk to you. No, they have not. It's not because of that. I've been using probiotics much before this company launched their probiotic. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years since I'm using probiotics. And I know personally, I have seen all my patients improve. Statistical improvement is there when you use probiotics. So vaginal microbiota of IVF patients can be characterized with PCR tests, which may be promising tools for diagnosing abnormal microbiota. So when you know they have and you use, definitely anything. Now, we don't know what is the reason why there is failure of IVF, why there is failure of pregnancy. So we can use, because there are no Cochrane studies, but there are quite a few studies which show that it has a beneficial effect. So probiotics for the prevention, treatment, and other infectious diseases, potential back. So by Michelle Silva also, and Campos. The high prevalence of Candida associated with increased resistance of microorganisms to the conventional antifungal treatment boosts the development of research for new treatment to infections caused by candida, such as probiotics. So, treatment with probiotics promotes the re-establishment of the natural condition of the microbiota with advantages over the conventional antifungal because they do not induce microbial resistance, are non-toxic when administered in adequate amount, and therefore do not produce undesirable side effects, and they stimulate the immune system. So I have personally been using for candidiasis, bacterial vaginosis, any vaginal infection, and when I prescribe antibiotics, definitely yes. Especially, and we know that all the newborns who have a little loose stool and diarrhea, we use probiotics. Similarly, when the gut misbehaves, we use probiotics. And from the gut, we know the vagina is very close. You can have infection into the vagina. And now, since the past 3 years, we know that the newer probiotics, they colonize more in the vagina. The number of colonies are more. They are more vagina-specific probiotics, which are useful for treating candidiasis, bacterial vaginosis, not only potentiating the action of antibiotics, but also preventing the recurrence. And I thank you all for a patient hearing, and I hope I was of some use to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for a wonderful presentation. I think it made for a great learning. And we open up the discussion for
sure.
Questions can come to chat, or doctors can unmute and ask directly.
Yeah. You can unmute and ask.
Or chat also.
Yeah, chat.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
In case of fluconazole resistance, what we are supposed to use?
Pardon?
In case of fluconazole resistance, because
yeah, you can use itraconazole.
Can we use that in pregnancy? In
pregnancy, no. In the first trimester, no. We don't use any antifungals in the first trimester. Maybe if don't try to use any antifungal in pregnancy. You can use long-term probiotics and your local clotrimazole creams.
We can use no.
Yeah. No antifungal in pregnancy.
Even third trimester.
In mid-trimester, maybe. If you think it is severe, recurrent, then you can use. Unless if it is absolutely necessary.
I'm using probiotic in all pelvic inflammation cases, and I got a very good result.
Yes, it's very useful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello, madam. Good evening. I'm Dr. Uma here.
Good evening, Uma.
It's very, very nice topic, madam.
Thank you so much.
The uses in gynecology, especially in this part of COVID era.
Yes.
Yeah, the bacterial vaginosis and the candidiasis.
That's why you have to be very, very detailed history taking because you're not examining. And you have to go on repeatedly asking the same question so that your patient knows what the importance of your questions.
Yeah, in the COVID period, many of the patients whom I was seeing in my hospital, their relatives and all, they were asking me, I'm getting the white discharge, what to do? So the medicine is really, really making us to treat the patients very well.
Yes.
One thing, ma'am, nowadays we are having that fentaconazole.
Yeah.
100 milligrams for the candidiasis. This is working very well, a single dose.
Single dose, yeah, you can give.
Yeah, that one which is nowadays, because itraconazole and fluconazole, though they are initial part of it, I think they are doing well, but not for the recurrences. More so in pregnancy, even in first trimester. So I think this is working better.
Secnidazole, yeah.
Itraconazole.
Itraconazole.
Fentaconazole. That is Fentin nowadays.
Fentin, yeah, I have used, but I was not very happy with the results. I did use.
it's doing wonder in our.
Yeah, they help for a short period of time. Maybe it's good as a local pessary for in pregnancy, yes, fentaconazole. Or local pessaries, yes.
Local pessary, yeah.
Yeah, local pessaries you can use in pregnancy. That's the only thing you can use. And if at all, usually one dose they say is sufficient, but I have found it's not useful. 2 or 3 doses, yes, definitely helps.
Madam, it's really wonderful. I really gone back to the olden days where we were talking about all the subject.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam, good evening.
Good evening.
Madam, so nice presentations, and I'm calling from Odisha. So
Yeah,
most of the
you.
time
Thank
when
you
we
so
get
much.
most of the time when we get such patients in the OPD, is
Mhm.
it necessary, madam, to treat all the time the husband also if they are there with them?
No, it's not necessary. If it is candidiasis, you have to just, preferably you have to treat the husband also. Candidiasis, because one spore, it multiplies and it can come from the husband. Bacterial vaginosis, you don't have to, but candidiasis, yes, preferably for a week, not 3 weeks like the woman, but for the husband, 1 week, yes. I do it for a week.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
And ask them not to have intercourse during that week so that they won't get reinfected.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, this is Jyotirmay.
Yeah.
Ma'am, treatment for non-Candida albicans VVC, ma'am.
Same thing. Recurrences are the same. Only thing you have to give for a longer period of time. That is the cause. It's not the albicans. It's more number of Gibraltar which you get. And then you have to use fluconazole, secnidazole for a longer period of time. Maybe I told, weekly, once a week for 6 weeks.
If it is resistant for that?
No, you have to go. If it is resistant, then you have to try
for fluconazole.
Fluconazole, itraconazole, fentaconazole. You have to go on changing your antifungal.
Okay. Ma'am, how about treatment with the 600 mg boric acid gelatin capsules? Is it recommended now?
No, now we are not recommending.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, madam.
Good evening.
Geeta here from Andhra.
Yeah,
Just, I would like to know whichever local application for local application, which drug do you prefer? Either combination or loliconazole or?
That's what I said. If she has, you think she also has tinea, I use clotrimazole plus fluconazole. But if it is only candidiasis, my preference is Canesten cream. It does wonderfully well, but it has to be applied properly. The only trick there is you have to apply all over the vagina, inside the vulva also, and up to the anus 4 to 5 times a day for the first 10 days. And then make it twice a day for 3 weeks, 2 more weeks. So the total duration of application should be 3 weeks. But it has to be applied properly. People don't apply. They apply only on half and then they come back, or they apply only once. You tell them to apply 4 times, they apply only once. And then naturally the spores multiply and the recurrence occurs.
How about this terbinafine? Actually, it is a category B drug, no?
Yeah, that is only local. We are giving only if there is tinea. Only if she has tinea onto the thighs, groin.
Yeah. Okay.
But if she has, we have to treat her. But we are not giving anything orally. It's only local fluconazole.
About this pre-probiotic, would you like to continue for more days or only till the treatment gets over?
Usually I give it for 3 weeks or 1 month, depending on the severity of the infection.
Yeah, some people, they complain of itching after taking particular food items, something like egg.
Yes, allergic. Yeah, that's
like
what allergy is there. Then we have to see what is the allergies. As I told you, there are 101 reasons for pruritus.
Yeah, okay.
So we have to see what is the reason and try to avoid that when they're allergic to that. You have to
Okay.
avoid. Even your nail polish, even the nail polish can cause allergy. Even your
Oh.
douches, your panties, the sanitary towels, the tampoons, everything under the sun. I can give you a list of 101 items which can cause pruritus. And even lice. In the modern day, I forgot to tell you, lice
Okay.
on the pubic hair. One patient,
Oh my God.
she showed me a photograph recently, this because I'm not seeing. She put it in a box and she put a picture of that, lice.
Okay.
That also, even in modern day, in modern women. So there's nothing you can say. Pruritus is a big, big chapter by itself. Even
Fine.
lice, you have to think of lice. I only told you white discharge. With
Okay.
this pruritus, you don't get discharge with lice. So I didn't go into those things which just cause pruritus. I only talked about candidiasis and bacterial vaginosis.
Okay. Even I think worm infestation also many people
Yes,
complain
that's what I
about.
told
That's
you.
a common one.
Yes, I told you. So if
Yeah.
it is anal, if the itching is more around the anal region, more in the night time, she has young children, you have to differentiate before treating.
Yes,
What is the
that's
reason for the pruritus? It can be helminthiasis, it can be candidiasis, bacterial vaginosis, what we are treating, or tinea. Tinea cruris has been on, it says the incidence is alarmingly increasing.
Okay.
And then, of course, tinea, I didn't go into the actual treatment of tinea, just I said local, but you have to tell them they have to separately wash their clothes, put it in boiling water, and put it out in the sun to dry, and because it's very infective from 1 to 1. And there also you have to use it for 1 month.
Okay.
If they stop short of using it, that's it. So what is important is how they apply the treatment, of how they apply the oil cream, and how many days, the duration is important.
Exactly. Most of them, as you said, they'll just discontinue in between. Yeah. Once again it reoccurs, they'll just jump into the hospital.
Hello.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
I'm Dr. Uma here. Madam, in the rural areas.
Yes.
In the rural areas where the doctors are not available, usually the most of the gynecologists, we used to do that WHO syndromic approach.
Syndromic approach, yes. If you think, that's why I said your detailed history is important. You cannot diagnose, supposing you are only talking to them and you're still not sure whether it is only candidiasis or only trichomonas, then you use the syndromic approach. It is not of much, it is losing its importance now. Nowadays we don't use it much, but if at all you think you're not sure, especially telemedicine, when you're not very sure that it's only candidiasis and you are in a dilemma, there's no harm in using
syndromic approach.
Yes, syndromic approach.
We have so many 6 types of kits.
Yes.
Even specific for bacterial vaginosis, specific for candidiasis.
Yeah, now we have specific treatment. If you're sure, you use the specific. It's still unclear, syndromic, but now I didn't talk about it because it doesn't have a lot of importance today. Thank you, Uma.
Thank you.
Madam, good evening. Dr. Madhulata here, madam.
Thank you, Madhu, for coming in.
Oh, very good. Excellent lucid talk.
Thank you.
Madam, what about this B-wash and all, madam? Is it really useful? Nowadays, they're saying don't use all these vaginal washes. What is your opinion, ma'am?
I don't believe in washing. You use plain warm water, lukewarm water, and that's the best. But if they have a little extra moisture, itching, then once a day, a little. So why plain lukewarm water is ideal.
Even soap is not necessary, no,
no,
madam?
so never use any disinfectant. No soap, no Dettol. It increases the infection. It won't. One of the reasons for recurrence. And if at all they want our grandmother's treatment, a little pinch of baking soda.
Okay.
A little pinch in warm water and wash. They have very good relief.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank you so much, madam.
Plain
Very
lukewarm
good talk.
water. Plain lukewarm water is ideal.
So most of our patients have OCD, I think, with that.
Yeah.
They go on washing themselves.
They go on. Everybody says I washed with Dettol. I said, please don't wash with Dettol.
Yeah. Thank you, madam.
Very detailed history. All this you should ask in the history. What are they using? So, because everybody tells I'm using 4 times Dettol and I'm still not cured.
Yes, madam. That's what our patients say. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.